You're looking at the average rent prices is $550 a week.
Hello and welcome back to Under El Spanish Sun. Today we are answering a question that gets asked to us a lot, is why we left Australia. And we have been meaning to kind of answer that question. There's so many reasons, but I guess what we want to say before we get into this is going to sound like us shitting on our home country. And we don't want it to sound like that, but the reality is the purpose of this video is to mention and talk about the things that didn't make us want to stay.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, you could say the grass is greener on the other side and all the rest of it, but the reality is this was our experience. This is how we felt. And this isn't like a, I guess, calculated video where we've rehearsed, and it's just our
Personal
emotions.
experience. It's our personal experience as to why we left my birth country, not your birth country,
Yeah,
but the country that
technically.
you were raised
Yeah.
in, and why we made the changes in such a quick time to actually...
And such a big change.
Big change,
and
a
we
huge culture
understand that,
change.
and a lot of people aren't going to agree,
Of course,
and
and that's
all the
fine.
rest of it,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
It is our perspective. It's our perspective
So,
and our own personal experience as to why we left.
Yeah. Now, another thing is that a lot of these might be specifically around Melbourne. That's where we're from.
Yeah.
And so some people might be like, oh, Australia's not like that. But it really just depends on where you're from. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the rat race. So now, there is a big thing got to do with like perspective when it comes to this topic, because everyone will be like, oh, well, it feels like a rat race in Madrid, or it feels like a rat race, whatever the case may be. Now, what we want to specifically point out is that in Spain, the idea is, for the most part, you work to live. In Australia, for the most part, it is you live to work. It is very common to go at life with the thought process that you're going to work, and only when you're 65 will you be rewarded and you can retire and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So the mentality is really that work culture, and there's no problem with like hustling. Don't get me wrong. Like, we love a good hustle. We love to really like work hard and all the rest of it. But it's this thought process that's number one priority, not your family, not anything else. Your job, your what you do from your 9 to 5, that makes you who you are. Now, leading into that, also in conversations, it's kind of looked down upon to ask someone what they do for work or bring work into a conversation in Spain.
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, it's
the number one topic.
It is who you are.
Even dating, what do you do for work? It's almost as if we need to solidify and we need to verify what we do for work, because that is the status.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what it is. Oh, you do this or you do that. Oh, you're in IT. Oh, you're a tradie. Or, oh, you work at Coles or Safeway. You will be judged symbol. Regardless.
It's not just a status symbol, but it's who you are. What
who
you
do
are
is who you are.
And that kind of mentality just doesn't like gel with us very well. So that is
I often speak about
mentality.
I often speak about now moving to Spain that ambition should not be attached to money. Ambition can mean a lot of things. You're ambitious to go to the gym. You're ambitious to help someone else. Doesn't mean money has to be tied to it. And unfortunately,
the default when you say ambition in Australia is
could be for a lot of other westernized countries in that perspective too. However, in Melbourne, you're very much tied to that, especially what car you drive, what you're wearing, where did you buy that, how much did it cost you. Those things are not really spoken about here. It's not something that people speak. When people talk about like what we're doing to the front of the house or our garage door, not one person has mentioned in Spanish, also because we're translating and so forth, saying, how much did you pay for this? How much did you do this? How much?
Money's not
No.
talked about
Oh,
like
that looks
that.
good. That looks nice.
Yeah, that
oh,
looks nice,
did you
you
think
know.
about doing this?
Yeah,
There's
it
never
is.
a mention about money.
Correct.
And unfortunately, the main topic in which pretty much when you really summarize this whole video is about
wearing a dress. Like
Yeah.
when you're walking around and you wear a dress and someone compliments you, the first instinct is like, oh, I bought this for this much. It's just weird. And it is a very rat race sort of thing.
And not only that, that's also tied to if a woman's driving a nice car, did daddy pay for that?
Yeah.
Oh, she possibly could have a great career. No way. That's frowned upon.
Yeah.
You know?
And as well, I will say with the rat race, as someone in business and that has my own business, I can say this without a doubt because I'm part of a lot of Facebook groups that we talk about this constantly. And the reality is that like when you own your own business, you don't have time off. Like there's no time off. You're constantly there for every single client. Whereas here, what we found is that it's very balanced. So like if you have your own business and it's a weekend, you're not answering emails. And that's so much more, I guess, socially acceptable. Which is really nice. You could take a breath and go, okay, my time is my time. And when I'm working and it's fine. But yeah, it's just not their expectation. And people think you're taking too long to reply and get back to them. People want answers straight away when you're in business. So that's something else. Yeah.
Which leads into the next point regarding job crisis.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it is mentioned a lot within the news. It's mentioned a lot of on platforms regarding Melbourne and Australia regarding job crises.
And we don't want to get too like nitty-gritty.
We're not political.
Politics
We're not political at all.
This is just like from what we've been made aware. And I guess
we also have friends and family within recruitment and job agencies and stuff like that. So it's not like we don't know what we're talking about. But about 10 years ago, you have this export of a lot of our doctors and scientists that need to help our medical system, right? And our way of living. Then that goes into the boom of our trade industry. Now, our tradies get paid more than our doctors and scientists and lawyers lots more. Like, it is a bankroll. Cool, it is what it is. Yeah. Which then ties into if you're not in that field, you might not make it in Australia.
Yeah. Look, if you are in construction and you want to move to
Australia,
no problem.
Go for it.
That's the country to go to.
If you're in construction, labourer, bricklayer, whatever it is, you go there.
And another thing, like the actual job crisis, people think, oh, there's no real crisis. Like, what's the issue? But here's the thing. You will go onto a website like Seek, which is like our main job search website, and you will see so many jobs. Now, you apply, and you don't hear back. Now, one of the things is that it's so unprofessional not to hear back at all. Yeah. But that is very common now. Now, luckily, because our close friend is in recruitment, we know the back end of this and why this actually happens. There are a lot of false listings. And what I mean by false listings is that these are listings just so that the company can see how interested people would be to join them, so that they could get their stature and their stats up. Yeah. So that's really sad to see, because there are people going, I've been applying, and then on the other side of things, if you're getting government subsidies or help, then when you're showing that you're applying for all these jobs and you're not getting anything, it starts to get into question. And
well, there is, and we know a lot of people that are months on end to look for jobs, right?
People that are very, very...
It took me 4 years to find the job that I was in previously. Yeah. I had started at one job. After maybe 6 months, I realized I'll stay here until I get a new job. Yeah. I had applied. Yeah. I had gone to so many interviews. I have a dear friend of mine that did almost the exact same thing, was looking for months with great experience, great leadership, great sales.
That's the other thing, and great experience. Exactly right. That's another thing that we see a lot of, is that when you're applying for jobs, if you're overqualified, you're automatically kind of like looked at like, no, sorry, you're overqualified.
We can't teach you anything.
And it's like, but it's like people are looking for these jobs. Yep, just hire the person that's overqualified. Yes, they might move on, but so could another person with a lot less
Well,
experience.
it's almost a double standard within
Yeah.
the job market, because it's like, we want someone with a lot of experience. You don't have enough experience. So then that person's like, where do I get the experience? Then they get the experience and you're too experienced, right? And not only that, a lot of people stay stagnant and plateau in a lot of jobs because then there's no room to overcome that position or to take over that position. Then you have to look elsewhere.
Growth potential in a lot of
there's not as much as
and,
starters are good, but once you're in a job for a while, I think that's it. I didn't get a pay rise for 2 years, so like there's little things like that
you're too scared to ask for a pay rise half the time because the way a lot of companies will make it out, you could be replaced anyway. But that's
but the job crisis is that there is,
as far as we know, and I'm sure there's a lot of other facts and stats and blah 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 that I'm sure you'll probably inform us on. But that's from our experience,
and you'll see it a lot, and you'll see there's always the genuine topic. They give jobs to certain other people. However, Australians or ourselves or whatever don't want those jobs. So at the end of the day, it's created this, almost balloon effect within the market.
So that leads us on to the economical crisis that we're experiencing, which we shouldn't be experiencing technically. And that's what frustrates us a lot, is because Australia is a rich country with a lot of rich resources, but the way it's set up isn't so that we could
prosper.
Exactly. And I'm not going to get too much into that, and he's not going to get too much into that, because we're not good with those like statistical facts. It's just not our thing. But if you want to learn more, there's a page on Instagram. The name is what?
Punters Politics.
Punters Politics, and he goes into it very well. He talks about the oil. He talks about everything, and he really breaks down price differences.
I think you'll benefit from that, because that helped us.
Like open our eyes and go, oh, we're not just the ones complaining or feeling this. This is actual fact, and this is legislation.
There's more people that are actually suffering from our policies. Of course, we're not politically driven. However, you see news, everybody does, and you're like, oh, why is that happening? But it opened our eyes to give us the okay to say, you're not the only one.
Your feelings are valid.
Your feelings are valid. And there's another sort of reason to want to move overseas or leave a country. Now, you may be experiencing that within your own country also, so I can understand both sides of the tile.
There are so many countries that are doing this that like are just kind of run by greed, and the reality is, when it comes down to I can no longer afford to live in my house or find a house, that's when it becomes really problematic.
No, 100%. And I think if you saw, and people in Canada are probably experiencing the exact same thing.
Yeah, apparently
the cost
they're very
of
similar.
The cost of living is it almost gives me, I won't touch on it and what it gives me. It gives me a lot of anxiety, and the reason for that is
it's really sad.
A minimum, and this is not including people that have children, and I know these stats at least. It's $150,000 per year you need for two people. So yes, people say, yeah, well, 80,000 each. You need to get the jobs that make 80,000 each.
Yeah.
You need to rise the ranks.
That's not just like, that's to live
comfortably. That's
just
to
live like barely.
Right? You're looking at about $250, anywhere between $250 to $500 a week in groceries. You're looking at the average rent prices is $550 a week.
The thing is, there's so much density of people looking for rent.
Yeah.
And although it's frowned upon, it does happen where if you're applying for a property and you say you're going to pay more than the next person, even though like legally this is not meant to happen at all, it does happen. So if someone gets a higher offer from someone else, they are going to accept that offer.
Yeah.
And even the bare minimum, $500 a week will not get you very much at all.
Yeah. So you're looking at $550 a week for rent minimum, right? Groceries between $250 and $500 a week. Now, that doesn't go into if you want to eat healthy, right? So the affordability to even look after yourself so you don't get sick and you don't have these problems and so forth is going to cost you more.
So much more.
So much more. Now, Easy to say, go get a better job. Go get that goes back into the job crisis. People are trying. It's not like there's a lack of people trying. No, the cost of living is a disgrace.
Yeah.
You're looking at, to buy a house, minimum $1 million.
Yeah.
Then you have to go further and further and further out from the city. So you go further and further out from your family. But guess what happens? So we lived in a certain area. The average price of house was about $500,000. Past COVID, I know someone within the same area, actually, it's probably like a 5-minute drive. You have to cross a train track. $1 million for a property where the rest of the houses there is no house.
Within 2 years.
2 years.
2 years that influx happened. So
The cost of a house was $650.
Yeah.
Theirs was $1 million.
Yeah.
And ours was bigger.
Yeah.
Right? And within a couple of years, bang, skyrocketed.
Yep.
Right? And guess what was around him? Cows and hay.
Yeah.
There was no other house around it. So how is it that we are able to afford to live when we're taking out loans for 30, 40, 50 years for your whole lifetime? No, that's not a way of life. That is not life.
Go into purchasing a house without they sell you on the idea that you'll pay it off, but it's now becoming more and more unlikely that you will ever pay off your house because once you do get close to paying off your house, it's likely that the consumerism has already convinced you to withdraw or redraw your loan and buy another property for investment that you'll never really see a return on because then the interest rates are going up and up. We've got a friend that's paying $3,600 or something like that month
a mortgage
on their mortgage.
Just their mortgage.
And that was never meant to happen. When they signed on, it was a very reasonable rate, and now it's just skyrocketed. So these are the things that are just, playing a part in it, making it so much harder.
And people within the boomer community are speaking up about it, how tough it is for people younger than us.
Yeah.
People younger than us, 35, we're going to say our age again, 35 and under, credit card upon credit card upon credit card for trips,
and
to buy clothes.
We didn't have that problem. We didn't have the debts that other people had. We didn't have the credit cards that other people have. We didn't buy into that, but we were still
struggling.
It was hard. And what I mean by struggling, look, I'm not going to be like, oh, we were on the streets. At the end of the day, we thankfully had an apartment. We thankfully had food on the table. You know, we thankfully had all these things. But when we kind of calculated the trajectory of where our life was going, we were never going to be ahead. Our next point is COVID. Now, it's a really sore subject for a lot of people, especially from where we are, Melbourne. It was the most locked down city in the world. So we have a very different view maybe from a lot of other people. Now, okay, we can go into the politics of it, but we're not. What we will say is this. COVID closed down so many doors. It made businesses suffer greatly. Other than essential workers, everyone else basically couldn't make money for a long period of time. Altogether, it was about 250-something days of lockdowns. So you can imagine how much money loss went into that. Now, in saying that, even the essential workers were then discriminated against and couldn't keep their jobs if they weren't getting vaccinated. So that was another situation that was horrible. It has led to great things, which as me being in branding, a lot of my clients are actually new in business because they had to find another way to make money. So it did open a lot of doors in that way of people thinking differently. So there was a really big divide. But it's not so much what happened during COVID that changed everything. It's how people reacted and what happened afterwards. How people reacted, and this is something that's getting talked more and more about today, is that people in Australia, or at least Melbourne in the very least, people are happy to let the government decide things for them and for them to just like skate by and do whatever the government says. For someone like me that comes from an Iraqi background, for us, that's dangerous. If you have full 100% trust in your government, that's dangerous. It can only lead to more and more tyranny. And so
certain policies like they did in Victoria to get over the hump for a lot of things and mandate certain things.
Yeah.
This is spoken about now, and there's a lot of people now.
And there are lawsuits that are going up against this, and they're winning because at the end of the day, what they did was not justified, or it wasn't justice. So for us, that's a really sore spot. Now, what happened after this?
Culture changed massively. Our culture, it doesn't feel the same. When you go out in public, it doesn't feel the same. There's a great divide, and there's a lot of segregation within Melbourne because of that.
It tore families apart, but even further from that, a lot of the businesses,
brick and mortar, restaurants, coffee shops, everything that was Melbourne, the nightlife.
Yes, that culture that we speak about, the coffees, the blah, blah, blah. Once it came back, there were a lot of companies a lot of brick and mortar stores and all the rest of it that did come back and open back up, but they weren't able to sustain themselves because they had already lost so much. So now you walk through what used to be the busiest streets in Melbourne, and there are closed stores for lease, for sale, closed, or closing. And so it's really sad to see that.
It is. There was this street called Chapel Street. And that's where we had a lot of our clubs. Good club, bar scenes, restaurants, really good nightlife. They started tearing down things and putting apartments instead. And apparently it's sort of picked up a little bit now. However, a lot of shops that I used to go to for clothes and stuff like that, closed. Everything's closed. So there's that. But that's not just that street. It's happening all over. And they're trying to force everyone back into the city, and then there's the whole thing of working from home and so forth, like that culture.
Road to recovery.
Yeah, it's a long road to recovery. And then now what is also being spoken about is sort of like PTSD, where we skipped over it, don't want to speak about it anymore, and holding a lot in.
Because it hurts.
It hurts.
It hurts. Like,
it did hurt a lot.
What happened to people's mental health was not good.
Suicide rates went up.
Absolutely.
I know a 13-year-old that did, and it's sad.
It's horrible.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And I do not, and this is why we're here too, is I do not want to stand by that. I want to be in a better scenario.
The rest of the world, Spain had lockdowns. The rest of the world had lockdowns, but they weren't in a tyrannical kind of way. They weren't to a point where, they hurt people severely.
And that's where the culture part kind of died for us. And we felt a very big disconnect between even us and our neighbour, or us and our people.
Neighbours were calling up and dobbing each other in if someone was out of their house for too long or had a guest over. These weren't...
Oh, but that's the law. You should stick. Look, at the end of the day, we lost more people out of it from things than we did through COVID. So at the end of the day, it's not even just about that. It's what happened to this culture. And this is, I hope I don't tear up, but what I remember it as, and I'm not that old to be like, whoa, back in more days. No, we're talking only about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Not
we were
even
known as the lucky country, and
the lucky city, the lucky. It's not that anymore.
I think the biggest part, I will kind of when we watched the news happening across the world about lockdowns, people were fighting for their rights and people were winning. And because the majority of the country was like, no, we're not going to accept this. You can't just keep us locked in our houses like this, blah, blah, blah. And the government was listening and said, blah, 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 whatever. In Australia, the majority were on the government side, and that's the issue. And you know what? Again, Melbourne. Next topic. I will preface this topic by saying I ran women's circles for a little while. And so a lot of women walked through my doors. We talked about this subject in detail. So it's not just us that have picked it up and woe is us. It is the mentality. It's the negative mentality of Melburnians. So a lot of people will see Australia or meet Australians as internationals and go, oh, everyone's so positive, everyone's so laid back. And Yes, yes, on a certain level. Once you get deeper, and that's the thing, is like, deep conversation isn't ingrained. You can't get deep with people unless you really know them, and people tend to be quite cliquey. And a lot of people have their friendships from when they were young, when they were in preschool up to teenagers. So people aren't willing to let you in to actually develop new friendships and relationships. That's just not the mentality. Now, going back to the point of negative mentality, we have a habit of assuming that it's okay, more okay or socially acceptable for someone to complain than someone to be happy.
Yeah.
So, say for example, I come up to you and I'm like, hey, how you going? And if your answer is, oh, I'm going great, like this is, living the life, all of that stuff, that is looked at like, oh, okay, almost like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, oh, what aren't you telling me?
You're not
or
allowed
what
to be
aren't you
happy.
saying? Whereas the usual experience is like, oh yeah, can't complain.
Yeah.
And that's something that we literally say,
Or
oh, can't complain.
Can't complain. One thing that I picked up a lot of people saying
Oh
is,
my God,
well,
it's getting really windy here, guys.
well, can't complain. And if I did complain, who would listen?
Yeah.
So the main subject is people wanting to look. I used to use that line a lot.
No, but that's the
but
thing. You get used to
yeah,
it. That's
you get
the normal
used to
thing. I didn't see that huge of a divide until we went to Bali. And people in Bali don't have a lot, right? And that's a generalization. But for the most part, people in Bali don't have a lot. And so they choose happiness. They wake up every morning and choose happiness and choose to wear a smile. In Australia, we come from a lot of privilege, right? So because we come from a lot of privilege, we tend to complain a lot quicker. And a lot of us haven't
Less
gone to that
gratitude.
broken place where you see people suffering all the time. So you have that gratitude towards life and just happiness is a choice.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the time when we met people or even people we knew, when we told them we got together and we were like, we're so happy, blah, blah, all the rest of it, people were like, oh, the honeymoon phase will be over. When we were moving to Spain, they'll be like, oh, how is it? And then when you say it's been great, they're like, oh, the honeymoon phase will be over. And everyone just assumes it's going to go to shit.
Well,
and
that's the thing. And that's the thing that
issue.
annoys me is the prejudice towards happiness.
Yeah.
You are not allowed to be happy. We have a thing in Australia called tall poppy syndrome, and essentially is fence sitting, right? And it's also that anyone else that is successful, stuff you.
You're going to cut them down.
Cut them down. You have to. But you need to be successful yourself. Look, this is in all societies. It's not just Melbourne or Australia.
Oh, no, but we're known for it.
But we are known within our own nation of tall poppy syndrome and fence sitting, right? And this is where it goes back to what we were saying before. Because we let everything else dictate our life within Australia, especially our government, there is no true actual happiness. And the problem is that one thing that you are looked at weirdly if you are positive and happy.
Yeah.
There must be an agenda towards that person if they're happy. Yeah. Why are they happy? If you, like for example, us moving to Spain, and you touched on it, babe, before. What are you doing leaving the country? You're crazy.
Yeah.
Why not? And this is where I'm going to say my piece.
I will say this, right?
Yeah.
We
actually was
did experience a lot of that, but from like extended.
Yeah.
But everyone that was close to us was like, man, do it.
All our family and friends were lucky, get out of here. Told us, get out of here. Family, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this. We're so proud of you.
Yeah.
Wow. And I'll say this as my part as to, yeah, you can look at all the other topics, but the honest truth is that you're a human being. For a lot of people, they believe in one life. If it is true, well, for me personally, this is just my belief. You can agree to disagree, and that's perfectly fine. You're entitled to that. I don't want to live my life in just one place in the world. Yeah. If we are humans, we are part of this world. I want to see the rest of the world.
Well, that's the other thing.
To be part of the rest of the world.
That's our last point. Our very last point in all of this, and we kept it to the end because I think it's the most important thing, is that where we are, a lot of people in the comments have said things like, oh, go to Perth. Why didn't you move to Adelaide? Why didn't you move here and there? But the fact is that for us, we don't plan to have any children. And our purpose in life is to travel and try new things and see new cultures. And it is nearly impossible to do that from Australia. It's just too far away.
Yeah.
So this isn't so much something like a negative or a positive. It just is. And for us, it's important that we can, on a weekend, you know, want to go to another country, and we can afford to.
We've
leaving
worked towards that.
Exactly.
We've worked hard to get to that. It's not
Absolutely.
like we haven't. We've built everything off our own backs also. But to say the distance thing, it costs more to go from Victoria to Queensland than it does to go from Spain to Italy. And this is societies with rich history that you can visit over the weekend.
We love,
not everybody does
old
that.
Buildings and that wondrous ruins and like vines growing on everything and all that beauty, that magic. Unfortunately, Australia is just too young to have a lot of that.
Yeah.
And it's not its
No,
fault.
it's got natural beauty
You know?
too.
Oh,
It does.
yeah, absolutely. There's so
Except
many
for
beautiful things
natural
to see.
flowers,
But
yeah.
like we specifically love old buildings, and we don't get a lot of that in Australia.
And you get to see the rest of the world too. And I think for anyone that is probably in the same situation as us, why not? You know, why not see the rest of the world and experience something different? Maybe you do return in 20, 30 years. You don't know, but you won't know if you don't put your foot out there and take some sort of risk in life to really understand what the rest of the world is like and how other people live. You'll never understand or appreciate your own life. So I can't go life knowing that I haven't experienced other places. That would be a regret.
In order to do that, it's like, at least like $4,000 for two people to fly out anywhere in Europe. So it's just unfeasible to do that when you're so far away.
Yeah.
But
I think
that, I guess, brings us to the end of the video.
Why we left
we just want to say this is focused on the bad. That's the point of this video. And I know we've been like sounding like whingy whiners, but there's so much we could talk about our love for Australia, what we have missed, what we'll miss. But the reality is that this is what the video was intended to be, the negatives, and that's okay. We're okay with it. We do want to say, if you do have certain reasons that you're thinking of leaving or certain reasons you have already left, or so many people have already reached out going, oh my God, I know your pain. I know what you're going through. That's exactly why we want to leave. And we just want to hear more stories. Leave it in the comments, reach out to our email on our website, anything you want really. But yeah, if you like our content, we would love for you to subscribe. The video, it just reaches more people really.
Yeah.
And it helps us grow our channel so we could speak on this more. But we really appreciate having you.
Thank you everyone that has tuned in and everybody who has been tuning in. We appreciate the community and the support. And we love you all, even if there's some negative things, love you too. So
that's okay. You be negative, just be honest and raw like we are. And that's all we expect. Bye.